I've always been good at reading people. It's what made me successful in business, what helped me navigate corporate politics, what drew Maya to me in the first place. She used to say I could see through anyone's facade, that I had an uncanny ability to know when someone was lying. The irony wasn't lost on me later. The first sign wasn't dramatic. It wasn't lipstick on my collar or a text message left open. It was the way Maya started taking longer showers, emerging from the bathroom with skin that smelled like lavender instead of her usual vanilla body wash. When I asked about it, she mentioned trying something new, but her eyes didn't meet mine. Small thing. Insignificant, really. But it lodged itself in my brain like a splinter. Then came the phone. Maya had always been casual with her device, leaving it on counters, asking me to answer calls when she was busy. Suddenly, it became an extension of her hand. She'd flip it face down during dinner, take it with her to the bathroom, sleep with it under her pillow. When I joked about her newfound attachment to technology, she laughed it off, but the sound was hollow. "Just work stuff," she'd say. But Maya worked at a nonprofit that barely operated after 5 p.m. I found myself cataloging these changes like evidence in a case I didn't want to build. The way she'd suddenly developed an interest in expensive lingerie, pieces I'd never seen her wear for me. The careful attention to her appearance on days when she claimed to be running errands. The late nights at the gym that left her glowing but not tired. Part of me wanted to be wrong. I'd throw myself into work, staying late at the office, telling myself I was imagining things. Maybe my constant travel was creating distance between us. Maybe my demanding schedule had pushed her away. Maybe I was being paranoid, insecure, pathetic. The voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my father would whisper, "You're not enough. You never were." But the evidence kept mounting. Restaurant receipts in her purse for places I'd never been. A sudden interest in a hiking trail she'd never mentioned. The way she'd started wearing her wedding ring less frequently, claiming it got in the way of her new workout routine. When I looked closely, I could see the tan line where it used to sit was already fading. "How was your day?" became a minefield. Maya's answers grew more elaborate, more detailed, as if she was trying to convince herself as much as me. She'd describe mundane activities with the precision of someone building an alibi. Lunch with Sarah became lunch with Sarah at the new bistro downtown, where they talked about Sarah's dating life and ordered the salmon special and split the chocolate mousse. I started testing her. Casual questions about her stories, asking about details she'd mentioned. Sometimes her facts didn't align. When I'd point out inconsistencies, she'd get defensive, accusing me of interrogating her, of not trusting her. The arguments that followed were vicious in their precision, each of us wielding our intimate knowledge of the other's weaknesses like weapons. "You're never here anyway," she'd say, and the words cut deep because they held truth. "When you are here, you're thinking about work. When was the last time you really looked at me?" I couldn't argue with that. Success had demanded sacrifices, and Maya had been the one paying the price. But even as I shouldered the blame, something cold and calculating in my chest whispered that her betrayal predated my neglect. This wasn't reactive. This was planned. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I'd gotten home early, hoping to surprise her with dinner reservations at the place we'd had our first date. I found her in our bedroom, trying on a black dress I'd never seen before, her hair styled in a way that made her look younger, more vibrant. She looked beautiful, and for a moment, I felt that familiar flutter of attraction that had drawn me to her 7 years ago. "Going somewhere special?" I asked. She startled, dropping her earring. "Oh, you're home early." "Book club meeting," she said, but her eyes were already calculating, adjusting her story. "New member. Want to make a good impression?" Book club. Maya hadn't read a novel in 2 years. I smiled and nodded, kissed her cheek, and told her to have fun. But as I watched her drive away, something inside me crystallized. The doubt, the self-blame, the desperate hope that I was wrong. It all fell away, replaced by a cold certainty that felt almost like relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was just married to a liar. That night, I made two decisions. First, I would stop giving Maya the benefit of the doubt. Second, I would find out exactly what she was hiding, and I would do it the way I did everything else, methodically, thoroughly, and with absolute precision. I called in sick the next day and told Maya I had a business trip coming up, a 3-day conference in Dallas, completely fabricated, but delivered with the same confident tone I used in board meetings. Her face lit up in a way it hadn't in months. "That's great, honey," she said, and I knew she was already planning how to spend those 3 days. As I watched her practically bounce with excitement, I felt the last of my emotional investment in our marriage die. Whatever Maya was hiding, whatever she was planning, she was about to discover that her husband was very, very good at his job, and my job, for the next few weeks, was going to be destroying her world with the same precision she'd used to destroy mine. The first call I made was to Derek Chen, a guy I'd known since college who now ran a corporate security firm. We'd kept in touch over the years, the kind of friendship maintained through Christmas cards and occasional drinks when business brought us to the same city. Derek specialized in corporate espionage prevention, which meant he knew all about surveillance technology and how to deploy it invisibly. "I need a favor," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Personal matter, discreet." Derek's pause told me he understood. "What kind of personal matter?" "The kind where I need to know what happens in my house when I'm not there." We met at a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place where business deals were made in whispered conversations. Derek looked the same as always, compact, efficient, with the kind of forgettable face that was probably an asset in his line of work. He slid a small black case across the table. "3 cameras," he said quietly. "Wireless, motion-activated, battery life of about a week with moderate use. Audio and video. The quality is excellent. 4K resolution, night vision capability. They're about the size of a thumb drive." I opened the case. The devices looked innocuous, like the kind of tech gadgets Maya wouldn't think twice about seeing around our house. Derek pulled out his phone and showed me the accompanying app. "Real-time monitoring, cloud storage, automatic alerts when motion is detected. You can watch from anywhere." He paused. "What's the situation?" "I think my wife is having an affair." Derek nodded. This clearly wasn't his first rodeo. "Bedroom, living room, and kitchen would be my recommendations. Most activity happens in those spaces. The bedroom one should go somewhere with a clear view of the bed, but won't be noticed during intimate moments." The clinical way he discussed it helped me maintain my composure. This was business. I was gathering intelligence, just like any other project. "Installation is simple," Derek continued. "They're magnetic, so they'll stick to any metal surface. Picture frames, lamp bases, the back of electronics. Just make sure they're not obviously placed. The app will walk you through the setup." I paid him in cash and left with my new equipment, feeling like I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. At home, I waited until Maya left for her yoga class, a new addition to her routine that I now doubted existed, and began the installation. The bedroom camera went behind our dresser, angled to capture the entire room. The living room device attached to the back of our sound system. The kitchen camera nestled between cookbooks on a high shelf. Each one was virtually invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Setting up the app was straightforward. Within minutes, I had live feeds from all 3 locations on my phone. I could see our empty house in real time, the spaces where Maya and I had built our life together, now transformed into a stage set, waiting for the performance I dreaded, but needed to see. The psychological toll was immediate. Sitting in my own living room, watching myself on my phone screen, created a surreal disconnect. I was simultaneously the observer and the observed, the investigator and the potential victim. Every surface in our house now felt different. charged with the possibility of revelation. Maya came home from her supposed yoga class looking refreshed, her hair in a neat ponytail, her clothes spotless. She kissed me hello, and I found myself analyzing her behavior like a detective. Did she hold the kiss too long? Too short? Was she overcompensating or pulling away? "How was class?" I asked. "Good. Challenging. We worked on balance poses." She moved through our kitchen with fluid grace, and I wondered if she was performing for me, or if this was just how she moved when she was happy. Over the next few days, I began documenting Maya's patterns with the same attention to detail I brought to complex business deals. I created a spreadsheet tracking her claimed activities against the camera feeds. Yoga class on Monday, but she didn't leave the house. Lunch with her sister on Wednesday, but she was home by noon and spent the afternoon in our bedroom, though the camera showed her simply reading. The waiting was torture. Part of me hoped the cameras would prove my suspicions wrong, that I'd discover Maya was exactly who she claimed to be, and I was just a paranoid husband destroying his marriage through mistrust. But the larger part of me, the part that had learned to read people, knew I was about to confirm what I already suspected. On Friday, I implemented the next phase of my plan. I called Maya from the office, using my most convincing executive voice. "Bad news, honey. The Dallas conference got moved up. I have to leave tomorrow morning instead of next week." The pause was infinitesimal, but I caught it. "Oh, that's sudden." "I know. I'm sorry. I was looking forward to the weekend with you." No, it's fine. These things happen." But I could hear the excitement she was trying to suppress. "How long will you be gone?" 3 days. Back Tuesday evening." "Okay, I'll miss you," she replied. The lie came so easily to her that I almost admired the skill. I'd married a natural actress, someone who could manufacture sincerity on command. It made me wonder what other performances I'd been audience to over the years. That night, I packed a bag with the same care I'd use for an actual business trip. I told Maya I was meeting some colleagues for dinner and drinks, a farewell celebration before my departure. Instead, I drove to a hotel across town and checked in under a false name, paying cash for a room with a view of the city that had become my surveillance center. The next morning, I kissed Maya goodbye at our front door. The same gesture I'd performed hundreds of times. But this time, I was acutely aware it might be the last time I touched her as her husband, rather than her adversary. "I'll call you when I land," I said. "Have a safe flight," she replied, and I detected the faintest tremor of anticipation in her voice. As I drove away, I watched our house recede in my rearview mirror and felt the final threads of my marriage beginning to unravel. In my hotel room, I opened the surveillance app and settled in to watch my wife's true life begin. The first day was almost anticlimactic. Maya moved through our house like any wife whose husband was out of town. She ate breakfast while reading on her tablet, did some cleaning, watched television. I found myself hoping this would be it, that my suspicions were wrong, that Maya was exactly who she appeared to be. But at 2:47 p.m., everything changed. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my phone buzzed with a motion alert. The bedroom camera had activated. I switched to the live feed and saw Maya standing in front of our full-length mirror, wearing a red lingerie set I'd never seen before. She was applying makeup with the kind of care she usually reserved for special occasions, transforming herself into a version of my wife that felt like a stranger. My hands were steady as I started the recording function, but my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. At 3:15 p.m., the front door opened. A man walked into my living room like he owned it, and I felt something cold and violent unfold in my chest. He was younger than me, maybe 35, with a kind of casual confidence that suggested this wasn't his first time in my home. He wore expensive clothes well, moved with the ease of someone who had never doubted his right to take what he wanted. Maya appeared in the living room doorway, and the transformation was complete. She moved toward him with a fluidity I recognized but hadn't seen directed at me in months. When he kissed her, it wasn't the polite peck she'd given me that morning. It was hungry, desperate, the kind of kiss that spoke of longing and familiarity. "I missed you," she said, and her voice held an intimacy that hit me like a physical blow. "3 days felt like forever," he replied, and I realized this had been going on for a while. Long enough for them to develop rhythms, inside jokes, a secret language of touch and gesture. I forced myself to keep watching, to document everything. The way he helped himself to a beer from our refrigerator. The casual way he draped his jacket over the chair where I ate breakfast every morning. The comfortable silence between them that spoke of countless similar afternoons. They moved to the bedroom, and I watched my wife become someone I didn't recognize. She was animated, playful, alive in a way that made me realize how dead she'd been with me. They laughed together, shared stories, touched each other with the kind of natural affection that had been absent from our marriage for months. The sex was devastating not because it was graphic, but because it was intimate. This wasn't just physical betrayal, it was emotional replacement. Maya had built an entire relationship in the space that should have been our marriage, and I was watching it unfold in real time. Over the next 2 days, I documented everything. Phone conversations where Maya called him by name, Ryan, and they made plans with the casual efficiency of an established couple. The way he knew where we kept the good wine, how he moved through our home with proprietary ease. The morning he made her breakfast using ingredients from our kitchen, and she laughed at his terrible jokes like they were the funniest things she'd ever heard. By Sunday, I had enough evidence to destroy Maya's life 10 times over. But I also had something else. A complete picture of who my wife really was when she thought no one was watching. She was happier, more vibrant, more herself than she'd been in our marriage. The realization should have been crushing, but instead, it felt like clarity. Maya wasn't just cheating on me. She was living an entirely different life, one where I was the inconvenience, the obstacle, the thing to be managed, rather than the person to be loved. The marriage I'd been fighting to save had been dead for months, maybe years. I'd just been too stubborn to see it. That night, I made the call that would set everything in motion. Maya's parents lived 2 hours away, close enough for emergencies, but far enough that they rarely dropped by unannounced. Her father, Robert, was a retired military officer who'd never quite approved of his daughter's choices but loved her fiercely. Her mother, Patricia, was the kind of woman who believed in proper behavior and family honor above all else. "Robert, it's James," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I need your help with something. It's about Maya." The concern in his voice was immediate. "What's wrong? Is she hurt?" "She's in trouble. I can't explain over the phone, but I need you and Patricia to come to the house tomorrow, around 2 o'clock. It's important that you see this for yourself." "See what?" he asked. "I can't say more right now, but please trust me. Your daughter needs you," I replied. The silence stretched, and I could hear him processing the implications. Robert wasn't stupid. He'd been married for 40 years, had seen enough of life to understand what kinds of problems required parental intervention. "We'll be there," he said finally. As I hung up, I felt the last pieces of my plan falling into place. Maya's greatest fear wasn't losing her marriage, it was losing her family's respect. She'd built her entire identity around being the perfect daughter, the successful wife, the woman who had it all together. Tomorrow, that facade would crumble, and she would face the consequences of her choices in the most devastating way possible. I spent the rest of the evening preparing. I compiled the video evidence into a comprehensive file, organized chronologically, and edited for maximum impact. I prepared copies of our prenuptial agreement, highlighted the infidelity clauses that would strip her of any claim to our assets. I drafted a statement for the divorce attorney I'd be calling Tuesday morning. As I reviewed the footage one last time, I felt a strange sense of closure. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Maya had made her choice, and now she would live with the consequences. Tomorrow, her world would end, and mine would finally begin. I positioned myself in the alley behind our house at 1:45 p.m., close enough to see but far enough to remain hidden. The timing had to be perfect. Maya's parents were punctual people, and Ryan typically arrived around 2:30 p.m. based on 3 days of surveillance. I'd called Maya that morning, maintaining the fiction of being in Dallas, and she'd sounded relaxed, happy even. "Missing you," she'd said, and I'd almost admired the effortless lie. At exactly 2 p.m., Robert's burgundy sedan pulled into our driveway. I watched my in-laws approach the front door, Patricia clutching her purse with the nervous energy of a woman who sensed crisis but couldn't identify its source. Robert's military bearing was evident even from a distance: straight shoulders, purposeful stride, the kind of man who faced problems head-on. The doorbell rang, and I watched through the kitchen camera as Maya answered, her face cycling through surprise, confusion, and something approaching panic. She was wearing the red lingerie set under a silk robe, clearly prepared for Ryan's arrival. "Mom?" "Dad? What are you doing here?" "James called," Robert said, studying his daughter's appearance with the sharp eye of a man who'd learned to read situations quickly. "Said you needed us." I could see Maya's mind racing, trying to process this unexpected variable. "James is in Dallas. I talked to him this morning." "He sounded concerned," Patricia added, her voice carrying the weight of maternal worry. "Said we needed to see something for ourselves." Maya's laugh was brittle. "I have no idea what he's talking about. Come in, I'll make coffee." As they settled in the living room, I checked my phone. 2:23 p.m. Ryan would arrive in minutes, and Maya had no idea what was coming. I watched her try to play the perfect hostess, offering drinks and snacks while clearly desperate to get her parents to leave. "You look flushed, honey," Patricia observed. "Are you feeling all right?" "Just tired. You know how it is." At 2:31 p.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Ryan was walking up the front path, and I felt a surge of anticipation that was almost sexual in its intensity. This was it, the moment of truth. The doorbell rang, and I watched Maya's face turn white. She glanced toward the bedroom, no doubt calculating whether she could hide, but Robert was already moving toward the door with the instinctive protectiveness of a father. "I'll get it," he said. "No!" Maya's voice cracked. I'm expecting... It's just a delivery." But Robert was already opening the door, and Ryan walked in with the casual confidence of a man who expected to find his lover waiting. Instead, he found himself face to face with a stern-looking older man and a woman whose expression was shifting from confusion to dawning horror. "Can I help you?" Robert asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. Ryan's confidence evaporated. I think I have the wrong house." "Ryan?" Maya's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried across the room like a shout. The name hung in the air, and I watched Patricia's face crumble as she understood what she was witnessing. "Maya." Robert's voice was deadly quiet. "Who is this man?" The silence stretched for an eternity. Ryan looked like he wanted to bolt, Maya looked like she wanted to disappear, and Patricia looked like she wanted to die. Robert just looked dangerous. "I can explain," Maya started, but the words died in her throat. There was no explanation that would make this acceptable, no story that would transform adultery into innocence. "Are you having intimacy with my daughter?" Robert's voice was steady, but I could see the violence building in his posture. Ryan took a step backward. "Look, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Answer me," he pressed. The confrontation exploded with the sudden violence of a summer storm. Robert moved with the efficiency of a man who'd seen combat, grabbing Ryan by the shirt and slamming him against the wall. Patricia was screaming, Maya was crying, and I was watching it all unfold with the detached fascination of a director watching his masterpiece come to life. "You come into my son-in-law's house," Robert snarled, "drink his beer, his wife in his bed, and you think there's a misunderstanding?" Ryan tried to explain, to deflect, to escape, but Robert was beyond reason. The first punch caught him in the solar plexus, doubling him over. The second was a precise uppercut that sent him crashing into our coffee table. "Stop!" Maya screamed, but she was crying too hard to be coherent. "Please, Daddy, stop!" Patricia was staring at her daughter with the kind of horror reserved for strangers. "How could you do this? How could you destroy your marriage like this?" "You don't understand," Maya sobbed. "James is never here. He doesn't love me anymore. I was lonely." "So you yourself out in his house?" Robert's voice was filled with disgust. "You bring this piece of shit into the home your husband provided?" I chose that moment to walk through the front door, carrying the manila envelope that would complete Maya's destruction. The timing was perfect, dramatic enough to feel orchestrated, which it was, but natural enough to seem like terrible coincidence. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, playing my role to perfection. 4 faces turned toward me, each showing a different shade of devastation. Maya's was pure terror, Ryan's was pathetic relief, Patricia's was shame, and Robert's was righteous fury. "James," Maya whispered, "you're supposed to be in Dallas." I caught an earlier flight. I set down my bag and looked around the room, at the broken coffee table, at Ryan's bloody nose, at my wife's tear-stained face. "Someone want to explain why there's a strange man in my house and why my wife is dressed like a whore?" The word hit Maya like a physical blow. She flinched, and I felt a savage satisfaction at her reaction. "I'm sorry," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm so sorry, James. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "A mistake?" I opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of photos. "Was Monday a mistake? What about Tuesday? Wednesday? Or maybe you mean the last 6 months have been one long mistake?" Maya's face went white as I spread the surveillance photos across our ruined coffee table. High-resolution images of her and Ryan in our bed, in our living room, in our kitchen. Timestamps showing the systematic nature of their affair, the careful planning, the deliberate deception. "You recorded us?" Maya's voice was barely audible. "I documented your adultery. There's a difference." Robert picked up one of the photos, his face hardening as he studied the evidence. 6 months? At least. Maybe longer. I pulled out more documents. Bank records showing payments to a hotel downtown, credit card receipts for restaurants I've never been to, phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts to Ryan here. Patricia was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. "Maya, how could you? How could you do this to your family?" "I never meant for this to happen," Maya said, but even she seemed to realize how pathetic the words sounded. "You never meant to get caught," I corrected. "This was planned, systematic, deliberate. You turned our marriage into a lie so you could play house with your boyfriend." Ryan, who had been silent during this exchange, finally found his voice. "Look, I think I should go." "You think?" Robert's voice was deadly quiet. "You think you should go? After destroying my daughter's marriage? After disrespecting my son-in-law's home?" What happened next was swift and brutal. Robert moved with military precision, grabbing Ryan by the throat and driving him backward into the wall. The impact was sickeningly solid, and Ryan's feet left the ground. "You're going to listen to me very carefully," Robert said, his voice calm despite the violence of his actions. "You're going to walk out that door, get in your car, and disappear. If I ever see you again, if I ever hear you've contacted my daughter, if I ever discover you exist in the same city as my family, I will end you. Do you understand?" Ryan nodded frantically, his face turning purple from lack of air. Robert released him, and he crumpled to the floor, gasping. "Get out," Robert said simply. Ryan scrambled toward the door, pausing only to grab his jacket. As he reached for the handle, I spoke for the first time since revealing the evidence. "Ryan," he turned, and I smiled at him. "If you ever contact my wife again, her father will be the least of your problems." He fled, leaving behind the wreckage of 3 families and the smell of fear and shame. In the silence that followed, I pulled out the final document, our prenuptial agreement, with the infidelity clauses highlighted in yellow. "Maya," I said, my voice eerily calm, "you have exactly 1 hour to pack a bag and leave this house. According to our prenup, adultery voids any claim you have to our assets. You get nothing. No alimony, no property settlement, nothing." "James, please." 1 hour. I looked at my watch. "After that, I'm calling the police and having you removed for trespassing." Patricia looked at her daughter with the kind of disappointment that cuts deeper than anger. "You're not welcome in our home either. Not until you figure out what kind of person you want to be." Maya's world was ending in real time, and I was the architect of its destruction. As I watched her crumble, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, complete and total satisfaction. Justice, it turned out, was a dish best served with surveillance footage and a prenuptial agreement. The house felt different after Maya left, larger somehow, as if her deception had been taking up physical space. I stood in our living room, my living room now, and surveyed the damage. The broken coffee table could be replaced. The trust, the marriage, the life we'd built together, those were gone forever. Robert and Patricia had stayed to help clean up, but mostly they sat in stunned silence, processing the destruction of their daughter's life. Patricia kept apologizing, as if Maya's choices were somehow her fault, while Robert maintained the rigid posture of a man holding himself together through sheer force of will. "I need to ask you something," Robert said finally, his voice hoarse from the confrontation. "How long have you known?" "I suspected for weeks. I've had proof for 3 days." "Why didn't you just confront her privately? Why involve us?" he asked. I looked at my father-in-law, this man who'd served his country with honor, who'd raised his daughter to believe in right and wrong, who'd just watched that daughter destroy everything he'd taught her to value. "Because Maya's greatest fear wasn't losing her marriage," I said. "It was losing your respect. She could rationalize cheating on me, but she couldn't rationalize disappointing you." Robert nodded slowly. "You wanted us to see her for what she really is. I wanted her to face the full consequences of her choices, not just the legal ones, but the moral ones, the family ones." Patricia looked up from her tissues. "She's still our daughter, and she always will be. But she's not the person you raised her to be, and she's not the woman I married. You needed to see that." Over the next hour, we worked in companionable silence. Robert helped me move furniture, Patricia swept up the broken glass, and I began the process of erasing Maya's presence from our home. Her clothes went into garbage bags, her toiletries into boxes, her photos into storage. Maya called 6 times during that hour. I let every call go to voicemail, but I listened to each message with clinical detachment. The first was angry, accusing me of orchestrating a cruel ambush. The second was bargaining, promising to end the affair and commit to counseling. By the 6th, she was begging, crying, promising to do anything to salvage our marriage. I deleted each message without responding. "She's going to try to come back," Patricia said as we loaded the last of Maya's belongings into her parents' car. "She's going to say she's changed, that she loves you, that it was all a mistake." "I know. What will you do?" I thought about that question as we stood in my driveway. Three people bound together by their shared experience of betrayal and loss. What would I do? I'd already done it. I'd exposed the truth, enforced the consequences, and reclaimed my life. "I'll remember who she really is," I said finally, "and I'll be grateful I found out before I wasted any more years on a lie." Robert shook my hand with the firm grip of a man who respected strength. "You did the right thing. It was hard, but it was right." After they left, I walked through my house one final time, checking each room for any trace of Maya's presence. In the bedroom, I found her wedding ring on the nightstand, the thin gold band that had symbolized promises she'd never intended to keep. I picked it up and studied it in the fading light, remembering the day I'd slipped it onto her finger and the hope I'd felt for our future. That future was gone now, but I felt no sadness at its loss. How could I mourn something that had never really existed? I removed the surveillance cameras and packed them away, their purpose fulfilled. The house felt clean for the first time in months, purged of deception and pretense. Tomorrow, I would call my attorney and begin the divorce proceedings. I would change the locks, cancel the joint credit cards, and begin the process of legally separating our lives. But tonight, I simply sat in my living room and enjoyed the silence. No more wondering where Maya was, no more analyzing her stories for inconsistencies, no more living with the constant tension of suspected betrayal. The truth was out, the consequences were delivered, and justice was served. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Please give me a chance to explain. I love you. I always have. M." I blocked the number and deleted the message. Maya had had countless chances to tell the truth, to choose her marriage over her affair, to be the woman I'd thought I married. She'd chosen differently each time, and now she would live with those choices. As I prepared for bed in my reclaimed house, I thought about Ryan's cowardice, fleeing rather than facing the consequences of his actions. I thought about Maya's desperation, her belated recognition that her choices had costs. I thought about Robert's righteous anger and Patricia's heartbreak. But mostly, I thought about the future. For the first time in months, I could see it clearly. A life without lies, without betrayal, without the constant weight of someone else's deception. I was free, and freedom felt like the most beautiful thing in the world. Tomorrow, I would begin building a new life. Tonight, I would sleep peacefully in my own bed, secure in the knowledge that I had faced the worst and emerged stronger. Maya had chosen her path, and now she would walk it alone. Justice, I reflected as I turned off the lights, was sometimes indistinguishable from mercy. I had given Maya exactly what she deserved, the truth about who she was and the full weight of what she'd chosen. What she did with that knowledge was no longer my concern. I was done being her husband. Now I could finally be myself. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.